All right, so today we're going to look at Colonial Georgia. It's founded in 1732 by James Oglethorpe, and he really had a vision that he wanted to implement, and we're going to look at that vision. So it was set up as a haven for debtors, so the idea is that there's all these people in debtors' prison, and this really happens because a friend of his from the military, because he had been in the Army or the Navy, I can't remember exactly which, but so a buddy of his from his military days had gotten into debt and couldn't afford for good housing. Debtor's prison is a little weird. You had to pay for a certain type of housing. He couldn't afford that, so he gets thrown into this dank, dirty cell with somebody that has smallpox. He gets smallpox and dies, and so James Oglethorpe's friend dies in debtor's prison because of smallpox. And so, he sees that, and that kind of changes his world, and he realizes that he wants to do something about that. And so he sets up Georgia as a haven for debtors. He wants this place where you can send debtors to work and make good and kind of have a fresh start. And it would also be for what he called the worthy poor, so the poor that showed that they would work and do those kinds of things. And so he sets this colony up with this idea in mind, and therefore he wants to limit the size of the land grants and alcohol consumption. He bans slavery there. And there's a couple things going on there. One, he thinks that's going to be best for these poor people, but the other is he saw the problems that Virginia had between the very rich and powerful running the government and being in charge and being kind of along the East Coast, and they're the ones with all the power, and then the poor indentured servants coming there and then moving out west and not having any voice in their government. And so he sees that Bacon's rebellion happened, and that rebellion brought forward brought a lot of those problems forward. And so he says, hey, I'm going to avoid that by limiting the size of the land grants, no alcohol consumption. The problem is, by these smaller land grants, the wealthy don't want to come there, and therefore they're the ones that brought a lot of people to these other colonies like Virginia, and so there's not a lot of people willing to move to Georgia, and it was really difficult to get the debtors there. It wasn't some easy process to get them there, and so it was a lot of difficulty. Once these rules are relaxed and Oglethorpe is no longer in charge, well, all of a sudden people start to move to Georgia. And so people live primarily along the east coast of Georgia, near the Savannah River. The Savannah is the first major city there, and that region is really good for growing rice and indigo. And so along the coast in particular, there's lots of rice paddies where they grow, and that requires lots of labor. And so that labor is done by slave labor. Only after, as I said before, after Oglethorpe is no longer in charge, he gives up his kind of dream of what it could be, and Georgia colony kind of becomes like the rest of the southern colonies. And so that's the basics there of the Georgia colony, the geography and the economy. The other last thing there about Georgia is it was also primarily Church of England, but like some of the other southern colonies, you could really be any other Protestant, and you didn't necessarily have any. It wasn't really a big problem for you. And as a matter of fact, I believe Georgia colony is the only southern colony, if I'm remembering correctly here, it was the only colony that actually doesn't start off with the Church of England as its as an established church. So, all right, that's Colonial Georgia. Real quick overview.